Hello and welcome back to the Scaling Europe show. I'm Seb and we have got an amazing lineup today. But before we do, I want to say a quick shout out to my sponsors, Gather and Checkout.com. Gather is an amazing platform for other startups to come and find vetted service providers, and Checkout.com is of course one of Europe's leading fintechs. Today I'm joined with Vidya. Can you quickly just introduce yourself, who you are, what are you building?
Yeah, absolutely. First, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be on this podcast. I'm Vidya Peters. I lead DataSnipper. We are headquartered in Amsterdam, and we like to make the lives of auditors and finance teams just a little bit easier by taking the grunt work out of it and making the job fun again. So super excited to chat with you today. Thanks for having me.
Amazing. No, it's great to have you. Super interesting company. You're doing really, really well. One of the Netherlands' fastest growing companies. I actually spent 6 weeks doing an audit internship. I ended up not pursuing it full term. I ended up doing management consultancy at one of the big four and then doing strategy consultancy at one of the big four. So I'm very familiar with that world. Are you able to give a bit more detail or flavor as to how you're helping that industry and how you're helping to kind of take care of some of that work for them?
Your experience is the experience of many people aspiring for a profession or a career in audit and finance. What they often do is start off in an internship and they picture themselves advising clients, taking the 10,000-foot view on the business, where the risks are and how best to advise their clients to navigate them, to mitigate them. And instead, the reality of the day-to-day job that they find themselves in is extremely manual, very, very detailed-oriented, error-prone work that's mind-numbingly boring. And that's the inspiration behind DataSnipper. So we built DataSnipper because we had an auditor in KPMG. His name's Alwyn, and his picture actually to this day is in our lobby as a source of inspiration. But Alwyn was meeting with the founders of DataSnipper, and he talked about how much he hated his work, how this was not the role that he thought he was going to be having for the rest of his life. And the founder said, well, what is it about this job that makes it so painful? And he said, look, my job is to check and verify transactions, to ensure that people are truly saying what is true about their business. And while that sounds perfectly reasonable at the highest level, the day-to-day reality is you're looking for a needle in a haystack. You're looking through mounds and mounds of paperwork, trying to isolate a transaction and verifying it down to the cent. And what that means is it's a lot of searching and finding, it's a lot of matching, and then providing that information back to your manager so that they can verify that you did your work accurately. And it's an enormous amount of time, and it can be quite boring to get through. And so that's the problem that the founders of DataSnipper set out to solve, which is how can you automate this? How can you use technology? How can you use AI to do this as rapidly as possible? And then make that job fun again. So you are in the seat of advising your clients. So you are looking at the business more holistically and not just doing the job of searching and finding.
And I saw recently that you talked about using agents and agentic technology in this world. Can you talk a bit about how you're hoping to leverage agents to solve this problem?
So DataSnipper has been on a journey of how can we automate more and more with technology. So the earliest version of the product was simply about bringing data in with a click and drop, which is where the inspiration for the name DataSnipper came from, which is how do you snip data and create a cross-reference, create an audit trail. The next version of that was how do you build algorithms to pattern match and to match data between what you're looking to verify and the hordes of documents you're looking to verify them with. Or how do you use algorithms to find anomalies in financial statements and documents you're looking to audit. The third level of automation was how to use Gen AI to actually gather data and find insights from documents. It was a very typical RAG solution to an age-old problem, which is find me the answers to this question. Now we are on the evolution of being able to build agents with Gen AI, which is, hey, imagine you have a junior level analyst on your team and you would give them a set of tasks to do that are quite routine. And it could be, hey, agent, go into this database and pull out all of this information, extract these key fields for me, match them to the sample, create a cross-reference for me. And imagine all of those tasks are immediately done for you. Now you actually feel like you've added a resource to the team and you have now used the next level of automation to do an entire set of tasks that would take someone hours to do.
Amazing. Yeah. Based on my limited experience and just the culture in the Big Four, it always felt like there was such an opportunity to automate so much of this work, that so much of it really was almost like box ticking, like it really could be done by an agent, which I think is amazing. I wanted to ask about your experience selling to the Big Four. I mean, you sell to, big accounting firms like that, but you also sell sort of in-house as well, it looks like. What's that process of selling new and innovative technology to, I guess, like very traditional industries or maybe like traditional departments inside bigger enterprise clients?
We are very fortunate to have global agreements with the Big Four. So we count KPMG, EY, Deloitte, and PwC as our global customers. We serve them across dozens of countries globally. But we also serve all of the largest external audit network firms as our customers. Additionally, as you mentioned, we also serve the internal audit and finance teams of large Fortune 500 companies such as Barclays, Morgan Stanley, Hilton Hotels, Siemens. And there's one thing that is common across all of these, which is it's really important to go bottoms up and ensure that you're reaching the users, the actual users of the product, and giving them access to your offering and ensuring that they're getting as much value and time savings out of it as possible. When you do that well, they become the change makers within that organization. It's how we were successful with the Big Four, is reaching the users first, winning them over, and having them be your biggest advocates within the large procurement organizations, within the large decision-making rooms in order to make those global contracts work.
Amazing. And how would you get those initial users on board? I imagine, in the Big Four, that might be the more junior members of the team, maybe like managers, associates, senior associates. How are you able to get them both using the product and then act as advocates?
It starts with starting local. So some of our earliest users, such as Alwyn here at KPMG Netherlands, we started working with local teams in the regions where we had access to them, and we would give them access to the product to use, to actually share with colleagues. And then there were two ways it would go. One is either they had very productive feedback for us on what we could improve on the product, and that's phenomenal. That's immediate product research that we could then take to improve the product, or they loved the product and then they would pass it on to a colleague and say, hey, this saved me a bunch of time. You should check it out. And we allowed the virality and the word of mouth to help that product create more awareness within the department. And then suddenly you would actually find that, hey, you had the senior people going, what is the software that's being used? We really need to vet this. But by then you'd created a groundswell movement among the users that made it easier for you to have a conversation with the decision makers about how they're using the product, what value it provides. So we think of it as a combined bottoms up and a tops down motion to really make this happen. And it's a formula that we use even to date. So we always offer a free pilot for users whenever they're considering Data Snipper. And we discuss with them the ROI of the savings that they saw during the pilot of the product, because the product is architected in a way where you can see every action that's performed and the potential time savings from that action that was taken. And so it becomes very straightforward to say, hey, within 2 weeks, you were able to save this many hours of work. And here's the impact that that drove for you as a team. And so it's a model that has served us well till today.
Yeah, amazing. It's it's like I think bottom up grassroots is, and I think once you get in with people and those users who really love a product, then it does just spread. And especially a place like somewhere like the Big Four with this huge communities of people who all know each other and work closely together. I also want to touch on working from the Netherlands, building from the Netherlands. You've been the fastest growing company in the Netherlands for the last couple of years. An amazing tech company. You've reached unicorn status, raised money from some of the biggest VCs across Europe. What's it been like building a tech company from the Netherlands, especially Amsterdam? Amsterdam's got a vibrant tech community, but it's not quite the size and the scale that you might see in Paris or Stockholm or London. What's that experience been like? And have you ever considered moving somewhere else?
I think Amsterdam is a fantastic city to be headquartered in. It's such a great central location. You have access to an enormous amount of local talent here, tech talent, that is a real privilege to be building a company in. I would also say the time zone is quite an advantage because you can wake up in the morning and you can sell to Asia and Australia, New Zealand. And in the afternoon, you can wake up and serve customers in the US. And a lot of people don't fully appreciate that time zone advantage because I spent most of my career in the Bay Area, and the Bay Area is great as long as you're selling mostly to the United States, but it offers very little overlap with other major markets, which is why you tend to see most Bay Area companies start and have a majority of their revenue still be highly US centric. Whereas if you start in Europe, you start with a very global mindset and you really think of the world as your addressable opportunity. You think of customers globally. And I think that's tremendously important. The other advantage that I have seen us be able to have is hire talent that's truly international. When you're based in the Bay Area, you're fairly limited to talent that's already in the Bay Area, and it's going to be very challenging for you to hire diverse language speakers. Whereas it's very, very feasible for us to hire German speakers, French, Spanish, English native speakers, all here in Amsterdam to serve a very global client base. We even have Japanese and Mandarin speakers right here in our office, which allows us to serve those unique markets. People don't realize that it's incredibly challenging to hire international talent in the Bay Area with those diverse language skills, not to mention the visa sponsorship has always been challenging, but got even more challenging in the last couple of months. It is very straightforward in comparison in the Netherlands to be able to sponsor people for a visa when you can show that they have a unique skill set that you require to grow the company. And so we have employees from dozens of countries. I think our employee base represents between 65 and 75 different countries within the company, which is, I think, a tremendous asset when you're trying to build a truly global product.
No, that's amazing. It's super interesting that I guess when you're building in a smaller market, you have to just think global initially, right, from the get-go. Did that change your product roadmap at all? Did you have to think about a product that would work in 170 countries versus just the Netherlands? And how does that vary for kind of the products that you've built?
That's actually a really great observation, because inherent to DataSnipper is that we have solved the problems in audit and finance that are most country agnostic. So we don't dabble in country-specific regulation on how things are unique to China or Japan. We focus on the audit problems that are truly universal, and it's why we have been able to expand and grow globally as rapidly as we have. So today we have customers in over 170 countries, and we focus on the audit workflows that are the same for an auditor in Tokyo as they are for one in Rio. And from the beginning, we have focused on being able to identify and work in multiple languages. And so we can identify a document written in Mandarin as well as we can that's written in Thai as one in French. And so it has helped us really think of a very global opportunity from day one.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And I'm curious as, like, has that, you've set out to build a global product from day one to solve problems that you're seeing across all 170 countries that you operate in. Have you seen different pulls from different markets, either for specific use cases or problems, or just overall? Perhaps some of these problems that are global in nature are even more prominent in local markets. Have you seen different kind of push and pulls from different places?
We absolutely do. Every day we're faced with nuances that are specific to a market. So for example, in Japan, Nissan can be written apparently in 4 different ways and still mean Nissan. We find that in Australia, it's not just prior quarter or prior year financial comparisons that matter, but also prior period, because they could do 6-month comparisons, which is very unique to what's happening in Australia. We find that commas and decimals are differently used based on which country or market you're operating in. And the biggest question we grapple with is, do we feel like this is an important enough problem for us to solve for? And in all of these examples, we decided they are, because we have to be able to identify Japanese characters effectively for us to serve our customers there adequately. And there are things that we decide we are not going to focus on because it's such a niche issue that it becomes very challenging for us to scale our product in a way that we're solving the most and the biggest important problems for the customers rather than focusing on the niches. And that's a constant trade-off, and sometimes we get it right and sometimes we don't.
What's your framework or approach when you're having these product discussions? Is it, okay, the size of our clients in these countries? Is it, okay, we think this is a really painful issue if we don't solve it? What kind of things are you kind of weighing up to decide?
there are two aspects if I were to whittle it down. One is how big is this problem? And second, what is our ability to solve it? And can we solve it now versus later is almost like a part B of that. And so on the first part, it is, for example, in our customer base, how big is this problem? Because it's not just, and I want to be really mindful, it's not just about the opportunity we can get, it's about doing right by the customers that we already have within our base. And that's more important, is learning and earning to keep the business we already have rather than just focusing on what's the new business we can go get. And so, for example, the question of the period or the comma was a no-brainer because that is fundamental to how Europe counts as numbers versus the US. And there's no way we would say that's not enough of a problem for us to solve. So that was a clear yes prioritization. B, are we well positioned to solve this? Because there are times when we feel like, hey, we have hit the limits of how well we can solve this given our capabilities, given the algorithms. And sometimes it will take you an inordinate amount of resources to get the next 1% improvement in that product. And then there's a part B to this, which is, hey, could Gen AI solve this better now? Because we have more tools now in our toolkit. And this is a question that we started to ask ourselves 2 years ago when Gen AI was, came onto the market and helped us solve more problems in a more innovative way than we could have before. And so it's usually a combination of these where we really kind of put these issues through the filter to see what we would prioritize and bubble up. And by the way, Gen AI is not a blunt instrument for everything. And there are problems that come up where we feel, you know what, even with Gen AI, this is not going to be solved as well as we would like.
Interesting. Okay, yeah, and I imagine the kind of the advance of Gen AI was quite transformative for your business and probably enabled you to do things that you couldn't have done when you were founded 7-8 years ago. I'm also curious to see like how has this changed the way that you're approaching like fundraising or broader market dynamics? You obviously became a unicorn only last year. But right now things are very hot. The market is crazy hot. You're building at this amazing intersection of, very verticalized AI, Gen AI, agentic tooling for an industry that really desperately needs it. It feels like now, given how hot the market is, you could probably raise again at a bigger valuation. Are you thinking about this? Are you looking at the market dynamics and thinking, okay, well, how does that change how I need to capitalize my business? Or are you just still thinking, well, we're well capitalized, but just heads down building the product? I'm just curious to hear your take as the CEO, having a look at how crazy the market is.
There's no doubt that Gen AI has accelerated our product roadmap and our ambitions even more. What would take us months to build, we can get a prototype out in weeks now. It's also made our teams immensely productive. As it comes to fundraising, there's a huge misnomer that European companies are at a disadvantage because we're not in the valley. And I don't think anything could be further from the truth. If anything, technology has been a great equalizer. There is no Zoom call or Teams call that a European can set up that someone in the Bay Area is specifically suited to set up. And it's a lesson that I took dear to heart because I moved here from the Bay Area and I realized that fundraising is not happening in some mythical coffee shop. You just need to reach out. You need to set up that call. You need to have people know who you are and make the case for a raise. So I just want to encourage all European companies to not think of distance as a barrier, to not think of access as a barrier. And you'll be surprised at how many VCs are thrilled to meet with more European companies because they do like to diversify their portfolio and make bets globally. So I just want to make a little plug there on fundraising. As for Data Snipper particularly, we've always been profitable. And so the fundraise was never about the money. We've always been well capitalized. To me, the question was, who do I want to add to our board that could bring us expertise, who could bring us access, and who could bring us more awareness and connections than we would have on our own. And that's why we were thrilled to have Insight Partners and Index Ventures on our cap table, because it wasn't about just the money. It was really about what they brought to the table to help us be more successful for the future. And for me, I'm not looking to fundraise again because that was never the goal. We're profitable, we're well funded, and we feel like we have the right thought partners with us around the table on that journey of growth.
Amazing. I mean, that's the perfect position to be in, profitable, growing strongly, well capitalized with great partners. But look, I'm conscious we're out of time. But thank you so much for joining me. I've loved chatting. It's a great business that you're building, and I'll be following along.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Hello and welcome back. I'm here with Leonardo. Leonardo, please can you give us a super quick introduction, who you are, what you're building?
Hey Seb, thanks for having me. So I'm Leo. I'm building Visual Labs. Is a AI and data consulting company. We help business implement AI solution end to end, from building strong data foundations to AI engineering to also product engineering, so that we can deliver the full solution. Our focus is like driving P&L impact. So we are very keen in like always showing like our clients before we start the project, what might be the impact that might have either on increasing revenue or decreasing costs.
And why is it that this is the business that you've decided to build? This is not your first business. You know, what is it about this problem, this area that you feel like needs to be solved?
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, I went through YC with my previous company, and I saw from there, like basically the AI revolution starting. Came back to London, and I felt how a lot of businesses were trying to implement AI into their workflows, into their processes, into their products without solid data foundations. I do have a, let's say, data scientist background, and I could see how without strong like data foundation, it's very hard like to build an AI solution that is reliable, that is production ready, that they can deliver the promise that they usually come up with. And I saw this opportunity to bring together, like, let's say, the old data capability, so data engineering, analytics engineering, together with the new kind of like AI LLM implementations, right? So I saw this opportunity to bring together these two services and help other businesses bring like a real impact into their P&L.
Amazing. And you only announced very recently. What was that reaction like when you kind of announced the launch of your new venture?
Yeah, we got a lot of interest. I think a lot of people are trying to figure out exactly like what we do, which has been also good feedback. Like we are definitely a service company, not a product company. And our goal is to help other businesses implement AI into their processes, into their products. And I think that's a clear distinction that is needed in the market, where a lot of companies are product companies, but they also do services. It's not yet clear. We don't have any platform or any product as of yet. We just help other businesses implement AI on the shoulders of giants. So we are pretty like provider agnostics. We do have a few partnerships, but when it comes to what LLM we choose for a given project, we just assess what's the best for the use case at hand, for example.
And can you give some use examples of like the types of things that you are looking to implement?
Yeah, sure. Like our services span from like, let's say, AI agents, like both in voice or like AI chatbots. Like for example, for a manufacturing company, we built a custom AI chatbot that helps the operators of their machines understand how to use the machine by building a RAG on top of like the user manual of those machines, like hundreds, thousands of pages. That's one classic example. Other example might be voice AI agents to handle calls, like for restaurants and things like that. All the way to more like, let's say, data engineering jobs by building like the data warehouse for a huge fintech that needed some help to set the data foundation to then build AI use cases on top of that, both AML or underwriting models that we can take all together in the next phase of the project.
Super interesting. So we're seeing a lot of companies at the moment build and deploy AI in these use cases, but I guess from a product perspective. So build customer service agents or voice agents and then sell it to companies. The approach that you're taking is helping companies to build and implement their own. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. The way I see it is that either you have a very specific workflow that fits one of the off-the-shelf products that are available on the market, and in that case is a great outcome, right? You can just like pick a product, implement it into your workflow, and that works. Maybe that's the case for like AI customer support, for example. I think there are great companies in that space, and where Visual Labs can help there is basically help you assess which is the best one. But there are a lot of cases where your workflow is not as simple as a product company might wish for, right? Yeah. So there is no fit between your specific need and the products available in the market. And that's where we can help you basically build a custom solution if it needs to be.
Amazing. So you are a services business. Are you using any AI tools, your own workflows, your own agents to help you optimize and deploy your services in a way that's going to be more efficient than like typical consulting or services players?
Yeah, 100%. We want to have a way higher margin than a typical kind of consulting business. And to achieve that, we must implement AI in our own processes. Those spans from, let's say, proposal building or assessment of the projects, which is very, very streamlined, like using like LLMs and other tools, all the way to implementation. So for some services where I say the degrees of freedom are low, so they're pretty standards, we can use AI to streamline those services on our side, right? So the cost and the speed goes up, right? We are pretty fast in delivering it, and the cost of serving the marginal client goes down because like we have standardized the process, and therefore we can leverage AI, not to fully automate it, but surely to streamline the delivery.
And then once you have delivered a project, is that you done? Would you partner with a company for 6, 8, 12 weeks, whatever, and then you hand it all over and then you go your way? Or is there any sort of continuation?
It's a mix of the two. I think it's like definitely a challenge of the business model, like being very transparent. A few projects are one and done projects.
Yeah.
Other projects are partnerships, right? Where we set a roadmap with the client and we define basically a series of projects that we want to do together. And those projects have a, let's say, sprint of implementation and then a recurring, what we call continuous support engagement, where we basically assist like their team to continuously improve or resolve a bug on the implementation that we have done before.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess the whole thing is underpinned by data, and that's true of all AI fundamentally. How are you able to help companies with their data? Is it about giving them structure? Is it about taking their existing data and using that and plugging it into models? How are you actually using the data to kind of really drive value for an organization?
Yeah, most of times it's like helping them understand, first of all, that they need structure and processes around data. So a few companies come to us and say, oh, for example, I want to build a customer-facing chatbot on top of our transaction data. Like these are classic like fintech financial service use case, where the user asks, oh, how much I spent on coffee in the last 3 weeks. And they think that just by plugging an LLM like ChatGPT on top of their database, this will work. That's very unlikely to work, right? So to do that, like you need like, to structure your data. You need like probably to build a data warehouse or a data lake, depending on what's the use case. And we help you with that. So that's a core data engineering job. That is nothing new, but in this AI revolution, I think it's very undervalued, and more companies will crash into the wall. Before realizing that like the data foundation is a must-have pillar before implementing LLMs or generative AI for whatever use case they have in mind. So we help them with that. We help them bridging the gap between, let's say, the structured data and AI by building semantic layers or ontology, which are made famous by Palantir. Like Palantir has this whole like ontology layer, which I think will become more and more common in the industry, right? It helps like generative AI, it helps ChatGPT, Claude understand how your data is structured, and more companies will need to build it to build production-ready generative AI applications.
Got it. And you're a data scientist. I think your co-founder is an AI engineer. I think you've got another AI engineer. So you, as a team, you've got a really strong data AI background. When you look at other consultancies or other service providers in this space, do you think they're always gonna, or how well do you think they're able to adapt and help companies implement AI? I think we've seen posts about Accenture being the biggest player in like making billions by AI implementation, despite arguably not knowing that much about it themselves. Like, what's your take on that? The future of consulting versus your kind of like small, very focused, very experienced team.
If you want to deliver an end-to-end service that spans from the strategy piece, so understanding what you need and why, to the design piece, which is let's design the solution based on your need, to the implementation piece, you need to have like all of these keys. And most consulting companies I see like popping up usually are very good at one of these, but not all of them, which is obviously very hard, right? What we are trying to do at Visual Labs is like be very strong technically, right? So the last piece, the implementation phase,
Yeah.
but also having the capabilities, the soft skills to guide the companies we work with in the top part of the funnel. I think it's easier to teach an AI engineer or a data scientist how to sell, how to be very close to the customer, how to service the customer. The other way around is way harder, right?
Yeah.
So it's very hard to teach a management consultant AI or data. And we have this model at Visual Labs, which is not new, it's like very famous now, forward deployed engineer. But what we mean by that is that the person we allocate to a project is in full ownership of the project end to end. We don't have and we won't have account managers, right? So the engineer is responsible of the relationship with the customers, is responsible of the communication with the customers, and owns the relationship end to end. And that's kind of also a new, like, let's say, business model innovation we are trying to bring to the market.
Amazing. No, that I think that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. I can't imagine account managers or customer success managers becoming experts in like data infrastructure and AI anytime soon. I checked out your website. It looks like you've worked with a bunch of amazing clients already. Where's that come from? Has that been outreach, personal networks, relationships? How's the selling process been of trying to like sell this proposition that you've built?
Yeah, like while we were in stealth, most of the pipeline has been through my first or second layer of network, which I'm very lucky to have. And now as we come out of stealth, we are going to have a more, let's say, disciplined go-to-market strategy. Most of the channel will be probably content, LinkedIn, and also like some events that we are really focused on. We're like pretty early, like trying to learn also that like what's the best channel, but definitely we want to come out of like my network and try to have a more, let's say, structured organic pipeline in the next few months.
Yeah, so that's interesting. Some of that stuff on LinkedIn, is that going to be like building in public, showing case studies? What's that going to look like?
Yeah, like we are about to release a few case studies, like from the first projects we have worked on in the last like 10 months. That's definitely one part of it. And then also like showing like our capabilities, like by, I don't know, sharing like white papers on how we think like a given use case should be tackled from a given industry and other stuff like that, that can be like the credibility around the brand, so that then like customers can come in inbound.
Nice. I wanted to ask, I interview AI founders a lot on this program. Actually, not just AI founders, but founders of all who are trying to implement AI or building AI products to sell to other founders. People are always saying it's not about cost savings. It's not about reducing headcount. It's about efficiency. It's about speed. It's about the quality of customer service. When you're speaking or you're selling your proposition to founders, to businesses, what is it that they're looking to get out of what you could offer them? Is it better quality? Is it reduced headcount? Is it, I don't know, like, is it efficiency? Is it effectiveness? What are the things that make people turn to you?
Yeah, at the end of the day, like from a business perspective, you are either trying to reduce costs or increase revenue, and any of other variables are just like leading indicators of that. So for example, if you are like trying to be more efficient, you are trying to reduce costs, right? Because all other things being equal, if your team is more efficient, capacity frees up so that this team like can do something else. And therefore you can have like also this like carryover effect on revenue as well, right? So the process we run when we meet these clients, it's trying to understand like very clearly what they're trying to do. It can be either increase revenue or reduce costs, or both. But we're trying to map out each project to the levers that then like have an impact on the P&L. Most of teams right now are trying to reduce costs. That's what I see.
Yeah.
Although it's a harder sell than increase revenue. So if we can share, like, we can show like that, for example, we can build a better underwriting model for a given fintech that at the same risk level can increase the number of approval of their credit card. That's clearly like kind of a revenue driver, and that's an easy sell, right? While on the other side, if I build like some custom like AI workflows to automate how people do a given specific workflow, that's a cost saving kind of like driver. And then other question come up, okay, cool, but then what I do with these people, I cannot fire these people. And it's also my job to help them understand how they can leverage those people in higher leverage jobs, higher leverage tasks, while leaving the ground kind of tasks, like the very kind of nitty-gritty, very boring, always the same tasks to AI.
Yeah. Are you seeing any sort of like cultural or people pushbacks in the organizations that you work with, or are the organizations that you work with quite kind of forward focused anyway?
Yeah, it's very clear across geographies and also across industries. So we work in the US, in the UK, and in Europe.
Yeah.
We have had clients across those three geographies. And in the US, like it's pretty clear, okay, cool, this like help me like reduce costs, it's fine. In Europe, for example, on the other hand of the spectrum, it's like, oh yeah, but then what do these people do, right? That's the question. So there is a little bit like of risk, business transformation questions coming up. And also across industries, tech companies are pretty used like to change, right? Change management in a way. They are not afraid of like huge changes in their ways of working, and therefore they are faster in making their decisions. When I work with more traditional businesses, for example, like we have had like some engagements with manufacturing companies I was referring to before, they need like more assurance. They need to understand more about what they're trying to do.
Yeah, okay. And for you and the vision of the company, how big can you take this? You know, this is very different model and type of business to your, you know, your previous YC backed company. You know, what is it that you want to build it? Do you want to build the next McKinsey, or do you think this is going to be always a small, lean, highly effective, profitable business?
Probably something in the middle. The company is profitable, is fully bootstrapped. We don't want to raise any capital because I don't think the business model also requires capital or is a fit also from VCs. So the idea is like to grow like organically year on year and then see what the options are as we move along, right? So we see like we set up goal for end of 2026. We will send a goal for end of 2027. And I think the company at that point might be at a sort of like bifurcation of where they can go, right? Do we want to build like next McKinsey at that point? Let's say. Do we want to stay like a profitable bootstrap boutique consulting company? We will see at that time. But the fact that I own the company and we don't have any, let's say, outside pressure, put us in the best place like to make this decision. And we see the market as we see the market growing.
And how different has your experience been? You know, building a company without investors, without the worry of fundraising, versus your first swing where it was very much like investor fundraising focused. Is that different, like stress levels, experience? I'd just love to hear a bit about that.
It's very different. It's a different type of stress for sure. So you don't have like this kind of like, you don't have like investor stress, right? So you own your company, like you are totally in charge. On the other side, you need to be profitable. Otherwise there is no business. From day one, you need to pay your employees, to pay your service providers, and make sure that at the end of the month, the money that comes in is higher than the money comes out. And this shifts your mentality as an entrepreneur, as a founder, on how you deal like with some levers that you can pull, right? So for example, now, if I had like more money in the bank, I would probably make a bigger investment on like the go-to-market function and how we grow. But I cannot allow myself to do that. And that's totally fine. We can grow like at a slower pace. And on the other side, though, like the upside is that I don't need to report to any investors and I can decide the pace of my company. And I don't necessarily, like coming back to the question before, we don't necessarily need to become the next McKinsey for Visual Labs to be a great outcome for everyone who is involved.
Amazing. Well, look, Leah, thank you so much for joining me. I think it's super interesting what you're building. I think we're going to see more and more businesses turn to people like you to get help. And I think we're seeing people who are struggling to just buy tools directly and just try and implement it without seeing the success. So I think it's really, really cool. And I wish you all the best of luck.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
Cool. Well, let's stay in touch.
Amazing, man. Thank you so much.
Hello and welcome back to the Scaling Europe show. I'm Seb Johnson. I'm here with Milos, CEO, co-founder of DeepSet. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Can you tell me, for those who don't know, what is DeepSet? What have you built?
Of course, happy to do that. So DeepSet as a company was started a bit more than 7 years ago already, long before the more recent hypes in AI and generative AI, right? We started the company 7 years ago with probably out of two motivations. Motivation one was we felt that technologically the state of AI that was back then still kind of rudimentary will probably improve, and we're going to see major improvements, major advancements that will just simplify the adoption of AI. That was motivation one. Motivation two was we didn't know how this large-scale adoption will look like and what a product could look like, but we wanted to go on the journey and explore that. And this is where we started the company initially as kind of, a vehicle for us to explore AI adoption enterprises. And we did that by selling actually services. So we built bespoke AI software for enterprises in Europe and solved all different kinds of problems for them, right? For example, search engines, classification systems, search over technical documentation, process automation when it comes to, automating financial audits. That was very, very broad what we were doing. Technically, any industry and any problem was a good problem for us because it was a great learning experience. In parallel to that journey of exploring enterprise problems and or actually finding enterprise solutions for AI, we experienced the technological advancements, right? That all of us are actually experiencing and using day by day today, which is the birth of the transformer model end of 2018. When that happened, we immediately understood it's a quite big thing. It's super powerful. We can way easier build AI systems for any kind of problem out there. So we started to engage very actively in the leading communities around these transformer models. And back then, those communities were mostly all open source, right? So we built ourselves a strong open source heritage around that time. And then end of 2019, we kind of succeeded in our mission to find a product because we came up with the idea of the Haystack open source framework. The Haystack open source framework is probably the first orchestration engine out there. Think of it as of a very complete system of components that are all needed to build agents or RAG apps or whatever AI system you want to build, right? And this is pretty much what we came up with end of 2019. And it was also open source because we were big believers that open source is the thing. Open source is, kind of almost a prerequisite for enterprises to adopt AI at large scale. And that is why we also felt our product needs to be open source at the core. And look, what happened since then is obviously the adoption of Haystack skyrocketed, the adoption of GenAI skyrocketed overall, which was a big tailwind for us. We moved away from being a pure services company to becoming a full product company. We raised venture money from Google Ventures, Bolt, and many others. And grew a company to be one of the leading players when it comes to, AI, I would say enterprise AI globally. And of course, in particular in Europe, as we're one of the few companies that, accompanied the whole GenAI hype out of Europe.
And was there a moment in time where you were like, okay, this is, I don't know, maybe we've found product market fit, or we've hit that sort of like that growth curve, and then that sort of like enabled you to raise the money that you raised from great investors? Was it a day where users skyrocketed, or something happened where you're like, wow, this is it?
I think we don't have this one event where we can pin that down. It probably happened way more organically and constantly. I remember, learning about the logos that were early on using Haystack, and then seeing that in 2020, right? We made a lot of successful business with helping organizations implement Haystack to solve certain problems, right? So you start to understand, hey, there are really problems that are solvable with this technology. This technology gives them something very promising, and we are authoring that. And this is kind of, how step by step you gain more confidence. You feel like, hey, we serve customers with the open source piece. How can we actually scale ourselves? What does the product look like that will enable more and more organizations to do this autonomously? And it was kind of, I wouldn't say there was this one moment. It's just, you just feel sometimes, hey, now it's the right point to launch a product. Now it's the right point to commercialize a product. Now it's the right point to raise venture money. That was pretty much how the journey went for us.
Yeah, nice. And I think it's such an interesting journey that you've been on since 2017 to now. You've seen, the pre-AI world when you're kind of building these tools for then. But I want to talk about your view on how things have changed. But before we do, I was wondering if you could give almost like real use cases of the way that people are leveraging DeepSet and Haystack to kind of build and kind of like deploy AI in the real world.
Yeah, of course. One use case that probably was quite en vogue when ChatGPT came out was that many publishers wanted to power their products with AI as well, right? So it was pretty much, let's say you're a publisher, you have this very famous online magazine, a lot of curated content. Now people see ChatGPT and everyone expects that style of interaction with your own content, right? That is something that people wanted to replicate, and they understood early on that they have probably quite individual requirements in doing that, right? If you're a publisher, you care maybe a bit more about what's the tone of the answers that are given. You care a lot about, that everything is politically correct, that, it's not racist, not sexist, all of these things. It's essential, right, to just guardrail these solutions properly. And you realize, hey, it's not just I'm implementing a model here. You need something way more robust and stable. And that is when it makes sense for you to build on something like Haystack or DeepSet, because it gives you all the nuts and bolts you need in order to really have a very reliable solution on your data that you are exposing to your clients. Other examples, also like a kind of public example, the Kitch system that we're co-developing with Airbus. That is pretty much, to help in military operations and decision making, right? So you have a whole bunch of data and documents. You need to make certain decisions, or come up with certain plans and tactics when you want to execute a military mission. It's a lot of data that you have to process that needs to be combined. Everything needs to be super reliable. These are the kinds of systems where we really feel, frankly, confident with, because it's pretty much where all we come from.
And what's it like working with companies like Airbus, European Commission, some of these other companies? They're not typically thought of as the most tech-savvy, forward-thinking organizations, but what you're helping them to do is deploy, state-of-the-art technology. What's it like working with companies like that?
I would say it's amazing. We're enjoying it a lot because we see so much honest willingness to adopt. It's not, it's not POCing. It's not really, hey, let's see what this can do for us. As you mentioned, the European Commission, we're also working with them. We're working with a few other federal ministries and authorities, also with the Federal Ministry for Research and Education in Germany. And what you see is that these organizations are really, they're not thinking in an experimental way about AI, but they're really, really serious about it. And they really understand this can do a lot for the way we are acting and operating. And all of them know that everyone is constantly complaining, about how undigital the government is, or certain services, how cumbersome they are. Obviously, a lot of that is not necessarily because of the lack of digital tooling or digitization. Often it's just the nature of the work and the nature of the procedures they have to follow and, provide ultimately also to us as citizens. But AI offers them new tools, right? AI gives new opportunities to probably also, implement certain technologies quicker, faster. It's way more flexible than any rule-based system, and people really appreciate that. So I have to admit and say, we're enjoying it. And also the level of talent in these organizations is great. It's really, obviously, the adoption cycle takes longer, but I would say the way European organizations, governmental organizations, are thinking about AI adoption is super serious and super committed. So it's really fun to work with these organizations.
And that's amazing to hear. I think there's a lot of criticism at the moment leveled at European politicians, bureaucrats, but also enterprises for slow adoption. Whereas what you're saying is there's actually a real appetite within European companies to make the most of this technology.
Yes. In particular, like, and I see it even being stronger in governmental organizations, funny enough.
Really?
So, yes, I can really say that it's at least for what probably for technology like HeyFit, right? Simply because the nature of the use case is way more critical. The requirements when it comes to accuracy, the requirements when it comes to how robust an AI system has to be to really be usable in a productive way are way higher, right? And this is usually where where our value is the biggest. So that being said, that is one reason why we're seeing like so much pull out of that segment. In enterprises, a lot is about this daily way of productivity, right? So people are looking into, hey, how can we help people, reply their mails quicker, maybe also read their mails faster, have better access to the knowledge bases we have on our drives and SharePoints and whatever that is, right? So it's more of these daily productivity tasks, whereas we see in governmental organizations, many of those are thinking in key processes and how can we really leverage AI in key processes. And that, is then again where we probably fit a bit better than in use cases where something like also ChatGPT just by itself is already very, very strong and strongly adopted.
And when it comes to AI and governmental organizations, what's your view on a lot of the debate around AI sovereignty? How important is it to keep our data in secure servers, kind of all the content? How important is it to have local LLM champions? Kind of what are your views on sovereign AI more broadly?
It's a very ambiguous topic overall, right? If we're very, very open and honest about it, right? And I think I would like to give you really like my personal view on sovereignty. Just to be clear, I think we're still lacking a proper globally defined term about what it means. But my view on it is sovereignty is something that I, in the first step, see completely independent of the geographical focus, right? So if that is sovereignty on the level of the European Union or Europe as a continent, or if it is on national level, or if it is on organizational company level, right? I think all kinds of organizations and institutions in the world have a desire for sovereignty. And so this is kind of like my first entry point to the topic. Now, obviously, governments usually tend to have a bigger desire for that, or at least, to have maybe an earlier need than others have. But I can see that sovereignty and control is something every major bank will want, every pharmaceutical company, frankly, probably even every startup for some applications, some use cases will want that kind of sovereignty. And what sovereignty means to us in terms of AI is mostly three aspects. Number one is the AI system must offer optionality for two reasons. Number one, you don't want to be locked into one of the key technologies, for example, LLMs. The second aspect is you don't want to, or actually you want to use AI and tailor it and guardrail it in a way that, it really fits your individual needs. I think the big problem will be this long tail of use cases that will have a very individualized flavor. All of these use cases will have massive ROI, right? Because credit decision making is super important in banks, but each bank does it differently, right? So how do they account for these individual characteristics in these use cases? And I think this is where optionality and choices are very important. Can I introduce my own guardrails? Can I pick the model I want? Can I swap the model if I want to swap it? I think that's like the first big pillar of sovereignty. The second one is transparency. And I think in software, look, the most transparent way of delivering software is open source, right? And that doesn't mean that people are looking, I think often people think open source means it's free. That's technically right, but you also can be open source and have a restrictive license, or you're open source and you still have a business around it, but people appreciate that technically the core processing logic of your product and offering is very transparent to them. They can test it. They can, they can understand it. They can read, maybe even research about it, right? So all these things that in the end contribute to trust, and in particular in AI or in any new technology, this is something that needs to be maintained, right? And I think this is why open source is the second big pillar for sovereign AI. And the last thing is infrastructure is obviously kind of, the big thing in AI right now. If you look about the major investments, all of them are actually in infrastructure right now. We're talking about NVIDIA chips that are being bought, data centers that are being built up. And what that shows us is infrastructure matters a lot to all that we will be doing with AI. And people need to have the flexibility that they can move also around, and that they can really make a choice on where does this run. And if it means it runs in an air-gapped environment in my basement, then they should have that ours. So this is what sovereignty means for us, and this is how also kind of we're addressing it. Haystack is highly customizable. We really focus on that. Plus, it's built in a way that, we really want to give choices to users. So it's agnostic of all models. It is open source, and it is an offering. Our commercial platform is something we also offer on-prem, besides the offering in the cloud. And that is what constitutes now sovereignty for us, right? To your question, if we see that technologically, on kind of core technology level, Europe needs on champions when it comes to cloud or when it comes to LLMs, I think we can probably live in a world where we are also still consuming US models, right? Or relying on US GPUs or wherever they come from, right? Not just the US, but any other country. I think, as long as we say, hey, our values of manufacturing and building these technologies are pretty much aligned with the country of heritage, I do not really see an issue. And I'm actually also, quite a friend of saying, hey, why shouldn't we use US models and, wherever they come from? I think, though, that Europe would do itself a great favor by actually fostering that such technologies are also coming out of Europe, right? Because I think the talent density is immensely high. It is the future. It will be also like the future of the wealth of a region or a nation or, a continent. And that's why there should be a big interest fostering that, and not just relying on the effort of other countries or other parts of the world. But I think sovereignty can exist also in an environment where many key components might not be European. And I think this is how we're looking at it.
You enable your users to choose, you talk about being flexible and transparent, enable people to choose whatever models they want to use. Do you see, does it look like to you that people in Europe are trying to, are opting for Mistral at all? Or, do you see that sort of like a bias towards local players at all or not?
I would say it's bias is probably like a big term, right? I would say ultimately people think in performance, and what does the job and what fulfills the requirements is still what's in favor.
Yeah.
That being said, if that is a question that might be answered in a way where you say maybe two vendors show some parity, or maybe we cannot fully assess even what performance looks like right now for us, right? I think still that it's a big question, which is the best model. That depends very much on the use case, or can depend on the use case, or on the type of data, or maybe even on the kind of language you're using, right, to query that model. And in such situations, I would say there is a tendency to look into European options. I've seen that myself, obviously, because we're a European company, right? I think we see that it is something our clients and prospects like, that we're coming out of Europe. I can also see this for other technologies, for example, NNN or also Mistral, who all have a very strong open source core.
Yeah.
But obviously, people have a tendency to say, hey, if I'm thinking about workflow automation, and I say like the solution is great, and maybe there are other great solutions in the market, but they're not coming out of Europe. why not rather opting for the European one? We're seeing this. And I think, in those situations, it's fair. I think it's a good thing. And these are maybe the small aspects in a decision that will help us, just accelerate the ecosystem in Europe. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, look, I think we're all out of time, but super interesting. I think, the position that you've got in the ecosystem is such a unique one. You kind of sit in the middle of it all. You've been here since 2017. You've got such an interesting perspective on the state of the AI market, but also, who's using what and why. Well, look, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks a lot, Seth. Thank you.